So there's a difference between a place that's dangerous and a place that's ungovernable. Dangerous means you might get hurt. Ungovernable means there's no authority left that can impose a consequence on the person who hurts you, no framework holding behavior in check, and no realistic path back to order in any time frame that intersects with your survival. This isn't politics, and it isn't ideology. It's hydrology, caloric mathematics, and the invisible systems that keep 8 people from killing each other over the last gallon of water. 6 regions in America are sitting on that knife's edge, and the math of their collapse is already written. Most of the people living there have no idea they're in the blast radius, and one of these 6 is the region everyone points to as the safe one. Educated, temperate, rain 9 months a year. It's where neighbors turn on each other fastest, and I'll show you exactly why before we're done. Start with the Southwest Corridor, that concrete monument to human arrogance stretching from Las Vegas through Phoenix into Southern California. This region has a fatal flaw built into its bedrock. It's a desert supporting 20 million people who shouldn't be there. Every one of them is alive because of the Colorado River and an electrical grid that lifts that water nearly 3,000 feet uphill across hundreds of miles. The river doesn't flow to Phoenix, it's pumped. Take away the grid and the water doesn't slow down. It stops at the elevation where physics always said it should stop. Then thermodynamics and human physiology hit the wall at the same hour. Phoenix in July runs 115 degrees, and the concrete gives it back at night, so the city never drops below 95. A resting adult in that heat, without air conditioning, reaches heat exhaustion in about 4 hours. Heat stroke follows. Core temperature passes 104, and the brain begins cooking inside an intact skull. By day 3, people aren't dying of dehydration. They're dying of hyperthermia. Indoors, in their own beds, with the doors locked. By day 8, the elementary school teacher in Tempe is standing beside her swimming pool doing arithmetic no human being should have to do. She has maybe 12,000 gallons of chemically treated water. She knows her neighbors. She taught their children. She's been to their barbecues. And she's calculating which of them she can afford to share with and which one she'll have to turn away at gunpoint. Because the moment word spreads that she has water, all of them are coming. She knows the ones she refuses today come back tomorrow, and tomorrow they won't be asking. That's not a breakdown of law and order. That's the desert reasserting its terms. The Sonoran can carry maybe 50,000 people with careful management. It currently holds 5 million. When a delta that size corrects, it does not correct slowly. The Southwest kills you with temperature. The next region kills you with the shape of the ground, and with the escape route 1 million people are certain will save them. South Florida kills you with geography before violence ever enters the equation. Miami, down through the Keys, is a limestone shelf barely above sea level, connected to the continent by a handful of highways that funnel through choke points. In collapse, millions run north at the same hour. I-95 becomes a parking lot. Gas stations need electricity to pump, and generators run dry within days. By day 6, the highway is a 70-mile graveyard of abandoned vehicles, and the people who thought they could walk out are learning what tropical heat does to a body carrying luggage and children with no shade and no resupply. But here's the real trap. By day 12, thousands force their way onto the cruise ships docked at Port Miami, convinced they've found salvation. Modern cruise ships aren't sailboats. They're floating hotels that need fuel, port infrastructure, and constant resupply. By day 18, those ships are floating prisons. No fuel, no deliveries, toilets backing up, 95 degrees below deck with no air conditioning. From the upper decks, passengers watch the shoreline, where armed groups are waiting for anyone desperate enough to swim back. The people who thought they'd escaped are sealed in a metal box surrounded by water they can't drink. Meanwhile, the peninsula does something quieter and worse. Miami's drinking water comes out of the Biscayne Aquifer, and the only thing holding the Atlantic out of it is freshwater pressure maintained by canals, gates, and electric pumps. Kill the pumps, and salt moves inland through the rock. It doesn't announce itself. By day 9, the wells taste wrong. By day 15, they're finished. The same dead pumps mean reclaimed swampland stops being reclaimed. Streets pool, yards turn to standing water, and within 2 weeks, the mosquitoes go biblical. Clouds of them carrying dengue, then Zika, into a population with no clinics. By day 20, South Florida is a patchwork of ethnic fortresses, each speaking a different language, none recognizing any external authority because no authority can reach them through the flooded wasteland. Florida traps you horizontally. The next region traps 8 million people vertically in the buildings they live in. The Northeast megalopolis, Boston through New York to Washington, is 50 million people with virtually no food production. New York City is the sharp end, 8 million people on an island with about 24 hours of food supply. Everything arrives on trucks through bridges and tunnels that become choke points the moment panic starts. By day 2, every bridge into Manhattan is blocked by abandoned vehicles. 8 million people burning 2,000 calories a day with zero resupply is 16 billion calories of deficit daily. You cannot forage that. Everything edible is gone by day 5. And water fails upward before it fails at all. It reaches the upper floors of a high-rise because pumps push it into rooftop tanks, so when the power dies, every tap above the 6th floor in the city goes dry inside a day, while the harbor sits there, undrinkable in every window. Then, the body under constant stress starts breaking down. Starvation impairs cognition within 10 days. The immune system shuts off. The pharmacist in Brooklyn who rationed insulin through the first week runs out completely on day 13. She knows exactly who dies and in what order because she's done the math. When the father of a 7-year-old comes in on day 14 with a gun, demanding insulin that does not exist, she cannot explain scarcity to a man watching his daughter slip into a coma. The gunshot echoes through a neighborhood with no police to investigate because the NYPD stopped functioning 5 days earlier. 36,000 officers for 8 million people. That ratio only ever worked because almost everyone complied voluntarily. When people are starving, officers choose between the uniform and their own dying families, and most choose family, which is the correct choice and also the end of the city. By day 22, what's left is armed groups holding infrastructure, former cops running survival communities, and ungoverned zones where strength is the only law. Boston, Philadelphia, Baltimore, D.C., they fall in sequence, all sharing the same fatal assumption that food, water, and order are permanent conditions. Those 3 regions become ungovernable because things run out. The 4th is different. There, industrial civilization stops being neutral and turns on the people who built it. If you want to see that happen, look at the Gulf Coast petrochemical crescent, Houston through Beaumont to New Orleans. This region doesn't become ungovernable through scarcity, it becomes uninhabitable through chemistry. Hundreds of facilities processing oil, cracking gas, synthesizing plastics, holding toxins in quantities the human mind can't picture. Every one of them requires active management by the hour. Cooling, pressure relief, automated shutdowns that depend on outside power, and staff who show up. When the workers stop coming and the grid dies, you have about 72 hours. It starts with fires. A pump overheats, a vessel loses containment. Some units run hydrofluoric acid, which boils near room temperature and travels as a ground-hugging cloud that doesn't rise and disperse the way people assume smoke does. It follows the terrain, and it destroys lung tissue on contact. By day 5, multiple uncontrolled chemical fires burn across a 100-mile stretch, each releasing something different, turning the air into poison. The smoke isn't smoke, it's aerosolized chemistry that sears the lungs. People 15 miles downwind cough blood. Then it rains, and rain falling through those plumes comes down as acid that burns skin and contaminates every water source at once. The refinery worker from Texas City watches from 15 miles out as the plant he ran for 19 years becomes a pillar of fire, burning in colors that don't occur in nature, chemical greens and violets and blues. He knows exactly which valve nobody reached and exactly what's downwind of it. The plume drifts over Houston, over neighborhoods where 2 million people are sheltering because they have nowhere else to go. By day 9, mass chemical exposure is producing neurological symptoms, respiratory failure, skin lesions from simply breathing. There is no treatment for citywide multi-chemical poisoning. New Orleans floods slowly, without its pumps, not from a storm, just from rain and the pressure of the Mississippi. And that water isn't clean. It's mixing with industrial runoff, petrochemical contamination, and sewage from failed plants. By day 14, half the city is under toxic sludge, and the survivors on high ground are islands in a poisoned sea. There's no governance because there's no territory. The environment itself has become chemically incompatible with human life. Now the region you've been waiting for, the one that looks like the answer. The Pacific Northwest has everything the others don't. Rain, rivers, hydroelectric dams, farmland, progressive cities, educated populations, strong civic culture. Seattle's water even arrives from the Cascades by gravity, no pumping required, which sounds like salvation until you understand that surface water still has to be treated, and the chlorine that makes it safe arrives by truck in quantities measured in weeks, roughly 3 weeks. So the city has water the entire time, and around day 18, that water starts making people sick. And nobody believes it because it's clear and it's still coming out of the tap. That's the fracture, and it's not a shortage, it's a betrayal. This is a region whose entire identity rests on the belief that competent people are managing the systems. The tech worker in Fremont, who spent a career optimizing systems, watches his neighbor get shot on day 11 over a rain barrel. And what breaks in him isn't his body, it's the model. That experts have plans, that institutions function, that problems have solutions, obsolete in real time. Then geography turns the knife. The Cascades divide this place into 2 incompatible worlds. 5 million people on the wet, foodless I-5 side, and the dry agricultural interior that grows the calories. By day 9, the refugee movement begins. Hundreds of thousands moving east toward those valleys. There are only a handful of passes. Every pass is a valve, and valves close. The organic farmer outside Yakima, who spent 20 years selling at Seattle farmers markets, is now standing on Highway 2, turning back refugees he recognizes, friends, customers, telling them his valley can feed maybe 30,000 people without industrial inputs, and that 200,000 are walking toward it. This isn't cruelty. This is carrying capacity enforced at gunpoint because no one else is left to enforce it. But the people turned back have nowhere to go, so by day 16, they come back armed, and the mountain passes become war zones. By day 23, the Pacific Northwest is 2 hostile territories divided by a mountain range. It looks safest because nothing was ever scarce there. It broke fastest for exactly that reason, and because a mountain wall works in both directions. One region left, and it's the cruelest of the 6, because there you starve while standing inside the largest concentration of food in North America. California's Central Valley is the paradox that breaks minds. This region produces a quarter of America's food, and almost none of it is edible where it stands. It's industrial monoculture, built for export and processing. 200,000 acres of almonds that require hulling plants, tomatoes bred for machines, cotton, alfalfa, silage. The actual caloric staples that could sustain a human being, wheat, corn, rice, are grown for animal feed or shipped out the week they're cut. 7 million residents surrounded by agriculture they cannot access without factories that no longer run. Then the water stops. The entire valley is irrigated by canals and pumping plants that lift water hundreds of feet across the delta and over the Tehachapis using enormous amounts of electricity. Cut the power, and irrigation dies. The San Joaquin returns to being what it always was, a desert with pipes in it. By day 7, the agricultural workforce makes the calculation: stay and guard farms you don't own, or go find water for your family. Most leave. By day 13, the fields are abandoned, crops rotting or stripped by foraging parties who don't know how to harvest efficiently. There's a second clock nobody counts. The valley holds over 1 million dairy cows, each needing 30 gallons of water a day and milking twice daily, or they go septic. So the largest accessible food source in the county is also the shortest lived one, and everyone within 40 miles works that out about a day apart. The grain silos in Fresno and Bakersfield become fortresses on the same logic. The silo manager in Fresno stands on a catwalk above 100,000 bushels of wheat, watching armed groups probe the perimeter. He has maybe a dozen people inside, workers who stayed, family, a couple of cops who understood the math. That wheat is 6 months of calories for 1,000 people, or 6 weeks for 10,000. Every desperate group within 50 miles knows it's there because it's the tallest thing on the horizon. By day 17, the first serious assault comes. 200 starving people who've decided that dying while trying beats dying slowly in the street. The defenders hold, but 3 of them are dead, and everyone inside knows the next group will be larger. The small cities fracture along gang lines invisible during normal times. By day 22, the Central Valley is a feudal patchwork of agricultural compounds and grain fortresses, and the state has no capacity to intervene in any of it. The Central Valley isn't governed, it's abandoned. Here's what ties these 6 regions together. Every one exceeds its natural carrying capacity by orders of magnitude, held in that impossible state by systems so complex that when they fail, there's no graceful descent. Population drops catastrophically through starvation, disease, violence, and flight. And governance becomes impossible because governance requires resources, communication, and belief, the ordinary belief that the system will eventually deliver safety and justice. When that belief dies, and in these regions it dies inside 2 weeks, you're left with territory that exists on a map and cannot be controlled on the ground. The timeline is the cascade. 3 days for supply chains to empty, 7 for water systems to fail, 10 for medical infrastructure to collapse, 14 for law enforcement to fragment, 21 for the psychological acceptance that help isn't coming. Which means that if you're in one of these 6 regions, the decision you make on day 2 determines whether you're alive on day 30, and you have to make it before any of the evidence arrives. The hardest truth is that the right move is almost always to leave early, before the highways clog, before violence erupts, before resources vanish. But leaving requires accepting that collapse is real and permanent while it still looks temporary, and most people can't make that leap until it's too late. There's a bitter symmetry in who dies. The people most capable of holding a community together, the professionals, the planners, the civic-minded, are the ones most invested in believing the system can be saved. Their competence keeps them at their post past the window. By the time they know it can't be saved, they've spent the time they needed to save themselves. Picture yourself on day 29, standing in whatever's left of your neighborhood, watching your neighbors, people you've known for years, walk past your house in groups, armed, not making eye contact. You're thinking about the conversation you had with your spouse on day 2, when you both agreed the government would handle it, that things would get back to normal, that leaving was an overreaction. You're thinking about your kids, asking why you didn't listen to that friend who left on day 3, the one you called paranoid. You're thinking about how you spent 20 years being the reasonable one, the one who trusted institutions, who believed in continuity, and how being reasonable turned out to be the most dangerous thing you could have been. The map doesn't lie. The math doesn't lie. And in the places where they converge into impossible equations, the window to leave closes faster than the human mind can accept that it was ever really open.